Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. Today is our second commercial corner. So I have Scott Smith with me again, and today he's going to talk to us about commercial leasing. We are going to record the session. He does have some slides and some additional resources that he's going to go over today. You guys already have access to those when you go into Home Sale Center, Training Education, and then click on the commercial corner tile. You will be able to get to everything he's using today and the recording. But if you have questions, comments, thoughts as he's going through everything, please feel free to put them in the chat box, and we're going to kind of tackle chat box questions as he goes through today, and then also save some time at the end for questions. So Scott.
Hey, thank you. Can you hear me good? Everybody good? Okay, cool. Welcome. Let me just trying to get to the right slide here. I just wanted to make sure that everything was running effectively. Thank you all for joining me this afternoon. I am Scott Smith, and I handle the commercial real estate. One of my duties here at Home Sales, I handle the commercial real estate for all the offices as the leases come due. It's kind of my job to oversee the activity of that. And so we developed this commercial corner as a way to help all of our fellow agents understand commercial real estate a little bit better and try to get them understanding some of the differences between residential and commercial, and then also help our commercial practitioners that are doing commercial real estate to be better equipped and to be able to close more business. So thank you all again for being here. Thanks, Jen, for always being a perfect host. So just kind of off the bat here, has anyone in the room, do they specialize in any commercial leasing or done any big commercial deals that that had to do with leasing or anything like that? Are there any what you would call veterans in the room that may or may not have done some commercial transactions for clients in the past?
Thumbs up if that's you.
Yeah, thumbs up if that's you. Okay.
Lots of videos off today.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's fine. So that pretty much means I'm gearing the education to people that this may be the first commercial lease activity that you've done. And that's totally fine, because we all have to start off somewhere in that first lease. I would say typically your client base is going to be maybe the first or second location for a company, maybe smaller business operations. Maybe I'm thinking Main Street downtown in your local areas. That's probably going to be your first clients starting out. When you're doing commercial leases, you're probably not going to start off with a Fortune 500 company leasing, 10 to 20,000 square feet in your local area. Probably going to start off with a 900 square foot storefront, retail, maybe office location, that kind of stuff. So just know, as we're going through that, that is going to kind of change how you're going to do things with your clients, because different clients are going to have different criteria that are going to be needed, right? For not just for their spaces, but they're also going to have some expectations in what you do as a service provider for that. So we kind of want to just talk through some of that and set some realistic expectations as to what you can expect when you are doing your first commercial transaction, leasing transaction. So first and foremost, commercial leasing is not easy at all. A lot of people will think that's the easy route to go for commercial, but it has more market share than investment sales, and it has more legal pitfalls than investment sales. probably one of the biggest challenges that I'm going to just say out front is that if you put your client in a bad location just because you got them a good rate on their rent, or you got them a good tenant improvement package or whatever, you may have just effectively put them out of business slowly, right? So you can create major economic damage to your clients by getting them into a bad lease. And nobody wants to do damage to their clients. So probably some of the challenges are starting off not knowing what questions even to ask, much less the answers to that, and not knowing really if your clients have the wherewithal to even close the lease. So a lot of times when you are first working with the client, they may be untenantable, right? Which means they have basically this idea in their brain of their business plan, or they may have already had a business started and they're working it out of their house, and they feel like they've grown to the point of, I need to take this out of my house and into an establishment to become a quote unquote legit business. And so the problem and one of the challenges with that is when the landlords look to see who is going to be their tenant in this space, they want to see some historical data. They want to see, what is your business plan? They don't want to be a business partner for your tenants. They want to be a landlord, a professional landlord, hopefully, and not just a property owner. But they want to see that you've got a business plan. They want to see that you have some historical data. They want to see bank records. So my recommendation to the agents that are doing commercial leasing is to make sure that you talk to your clients right from the up front and kind of go through their expectations and their business plans to make sure that this is even a viable option. Can they even secure a loan for the lease? And so if you're sitting there, you're kind of thinking, well, why would you need a loan for a lease, right? That's a very valid question. But even if you're going to lease the property, they're still going to need to have things done to the property, whether that is something as simple as maybe resurfacing the parking lot or whatever, something very minor. But if you don't have any cash saved up, that money has to come from somewhere. And then so you usually would go to the lending institution to where your business banking activity is and ask for a business loan to include some of the tenant improvements for those buildings. So a lot of your first clients probably aren't going to have thought that through, right? And so they may be lacking the capital to even lease their first location. So that's kind of just some real upfront, right from the get-go challenges that you're going to encounter as you're going through these commercial transactions. The other part about this is when you're doing a commercial lease, whereas in residential, right, you guys typically do what, 1-year leases, right? Nods, yeah, right. So in commercial, we don't ever do a 1-year lease unless if it's like a 12-month renewal on a lease because we haven't been able to relocate to a different property. Our leases are always generally 3 to sometimes 10 years of a term. So when the lease has to get co-signed for, which basically means if you're a non-credited tenant or a small mom and pop operation and this is your first or second location, the landlords are going to say, well, how do I know that you can afford to pay the lease? And if your business can't pay the lease, we're going to need you, the business owner, to offer security that the lease will get paid, right? Well, if it's a 1-year term, maybe that's not so much money. But if you're talking a 10-year term, that may be a lot to securitize. And so a lot of business owners don't necessarily want to do that because of the personal liability that comes along with that. Now, there's ways that you can mitigate that. And I'm not an attorney, but they would probably be the best ones to ask on how do you mitigate some of that. There are some financial vehicles available to that. You can get bond financing, which is a form of basically insurance that you set aside, that if the landlord, if you for some reason fall into a scenario to where you can't pay the rent, then the landlord can draw down from that bond financing to make sure that his notes are covered. That's probably one of the biggest things long-term versus short-term from the residential and commercial. I would be real careful if a landlord said, I want only a 12-month lease. It may take you 3 or 4 months just from the day you move in to start getting your business activity up and running, right? And then you only got 8 more months and then it's time to move again. So be very careful of that. The disagreements that you have to navigate between the landlord and the tenant are numerous, way too numerous to mention here. Everything in commercial real estate is negotiable. Just to name a few in a lease, as you are going for that longer term lease, the chances are that they are probably not going to remain that same rate throughout the 10-year or 5-year or 3-year lease. Usually you're going to have escalations in that on a price per square foot basis. Now, in different markets, you're going to see different escalation rates, but in leasing terms, it's usually anywhere 2 to 3% annually that rental rate is going to increase. In some markets, it's a little bit different. I was just talking with someone from California, and they're actually doing 7 because of inflation. So how the economies nationally are working into this is we're in a very interesting scenario, because if inflation is at 7% and you have signed a lease agreement that you're going to do a 3% annual escalation, well, then technically the landlord is losing 4%, right? So these are just things to look out for. And so you're going to want to negotiate that up front. You're also going to want to negotiate things like how much price per square foot you're expected to contribute in your build out. So even if you have a building that you're ready to move into, there's probably going to need to be some customizations that are going to go into it. And it may be even some things that you haven't thought about, like maybe the previous use only allowed for 1 bathroom in a building, or because you're going to increase the occupancy, maybe you have more employees, maybe it's just the type of your business, you may have to add another bathroom. Well, if you're familiar with construction cost in commercial, if you're adding a bathroom, that's $25,000. So you probably are going to want to make sure that those expectations are all on the same page as to how much you're going to contribute, or is the landlord going to contribute? And then what happens when you move? Do you have to return it to an empty slate, or what does that look like? So be very careful. And also, I just want to put this out there, we don't write leases. So you should have your clients have attorneys review the lease documents because they can get real tricky real quick. And so just be aware of all those great areas of conflict between the landlord and the tenant. That's some quick challenges. Now I want to talk for a minute about the leasing process, because this is really kind of like boots on the ground where most of y'all are going to be in your day-to-day activities. So first thing you do, let's say you get a call in the office and you got somebody that says, hey, Scott, I want to put in a pet salon in this little strip center on Main Street. Can you help me? It's like, okay, well, sure. Tell me about your business, right? This is the point to where usually I'm going to ask some questions to kind of see, is this a viable option for this client? I'm going to ask questions like, where did you find the property? And then, oh, they just drove by and they saw it vacant. Well, just because it's vacant doesn't mean that it's going to be that allowable use for that asset. So you may have a situation where even though the landlord may want to rent the building to that tenant, the city or zoning won't allow that type of use in that location, and therefore you got to move on. So I'm always cautious whenever tenants bring me the property, because they may not even be aware of that. And then it's like, well, yeah, well, I can't really show you that one because I can't put a doggy daycare there, right? So I usually ask those kind of questions. And then I usually say, is this your first or second location? And then that's really going to be telling of that client's financial capabilities. Because if it's a second location, then I got some data that I can pull from. And then I say, oh, great. When do you think that we can meet at your business? So I'm doing two things whenever I say that. One, I am setting up a future date to meet them and kind of get to know the people. And I'm also want to go see their office or their business to see how they're operating, to see, what do they need in the actual business? Like, do they need high-speed internet? Do they need signage? How much parking is needed? Is it all have to be on a ground floor, or can it be on a second floor? Do they need storage? Do like all these different, there's like 30 some odd questions you can ask them. And that's kind of what you're trying to go through whenever you go and meet at their location. It's a lot harder if they don't have a location, because then you have to work through those questions with them, and it may be stuff they had not even thought about, right? So after you get that, and then you got a lot of homework to do, because you really just kind of started the surface of finding a commercial lease. Now, let me press pause there for a second. And let me just say, have y'all heard the term, is the squeeze worth the juice? Right? Well, if you haven't, what that means is the amount of effort going to be worth the end result? Right? So could this commercial process, as hopefully you're starting to see, is a lot more than like going on Bright and seeing what's available and then sending them to the client and then going like looking out there. That's really not how you do commercial at all. Yes, you need to be able to find those properties, and that's kind of what we're getting ready into in the showing the properties. But to be honest with you, the more you spend on step one, the more time you spend on step one, the less time you have to spend on step two, right? So if you do your job better up front and looking at what the tenant's needs are and what the space requirements are, then the less time you're going to have to show properties. If somebody comes to me and they say, well, they've found 10 properties, I know they haven't done their job on the front end to really kind of narrow that down as to what needs to get done to find the right property for that business. There's a couple things I'm going to let you guys in, and this is actually tools that I use that I've been customizing and building over the last 20 years. But whenever I'm doing work for you guys and for other clients, these are the actual steps and tools that I use. And before I even go show properties, okay? So you're going to see I will spend weeks, sometimes months, up front before I even show a property, because I need to make sure that the property that I'm going to show them fits the tenant's needs. So let me do this. Okay. Everybody see that? Is that good? Do y'all see the marketing template?
It may be a little bigger, Scott, if you click that play slideshow in the top right corner, just so it's like your full screen. Yep, that's better.
All right, y'all like that?
Thank you.
Okay. So this is one that I built. This is actually, I didn't realize it was on there. This is actually one I did for Gettysburg. I just forgot to take out the title. But so this is what I use whenever I'm looking at properties, not just for home sale, but for all the clients. So this is your table of contents. So what I'm doing here is just like you guys would do with what you call, your CMA or whatever, right? Where you look for 3 properties that have sold and 3 properties that are active. You're kind of doing that, but in a much more concise manner. I would say you're not just going and pulling stuff on Brighton, having this computer software do it for you. You actually got to do the research in that. So this is the front page, and this is kind of just summarizes what I'm looking at. You would put the property address, the subject property address. So if you have a specific asset that you're comparing it against, you would put that there. You would use your methodology. In this case, we use lease comps to determine what lease rates we would find in the marketplace, right? And then we would do a market summary conclusion. This is basically your executive summary, like your synopsis. So from what we found over the years of doing this is that when you have executives looking at this information, they're not going to look at all 20 pages, right? What they're going to do is they're going to read this front page, get the synopsis, and then if they're interested in whatever this says, then they'll go and look for the information on those pages, right? That's just how they operate. So we kind of do a snapshot here and say, here's what the overall market condition is in this area that you're looking for. Here's some key information: current rental rates, broker's lease value opinion, and then you'll see over there it says full service. We'll get to that in a minute. Any variances in the market, average market triple net expenses. We're going to get to a little bit of that too. Current existing lease expenses. So this is where you're going to look at if they have an existing location and they're looking to move into a second location, or maybe their lease is up and they're looking to just move to a better location. This kind of gives you the basis of which you can start comparing assets. And then we'd say, okay, here's the subject property. So we would put, in this case, it's just, I don't even know where this photo came, Houston, Texas. It just has the photo. It's basically what you would use an old MLS printout, right? when you're looking at historical and the history, you would see that information, as well as maybe some old photos. You just kind of want to put that in there so you have a visual comparison as to what they're in now versus where they're going to go or what is available in the market. And then the location map, you're actually going to put a physical map there that kind of shows where they're at in the marketplace. And then if you have found comparables, you would actually also put them numerically on the map so they can kind of see geographically where those opportunities exist. Like so, right? Okay. So this kind of summarizes all the lease comparisons, and they say some of the statistics. Gross asking rent, which would be how much in this circle here, how much are they asking per square foot? In this case, it says like there's 8 possible properties. The low is 2340, the average is 2695, and the median is 2788. So you would know somewhere in there, okay, I'm gonna be from 2327 is what they're asking. But what you really want to know is what the effective rate is, and that is what is actually the deals that are signed and what is that rental rate. And then TI allowance, how much the landlords are contributing per square foot to have that tenant there. And then how long the deals are and what square footage the deals are as well, because different square footages are going to command different rental rates in different markets. So you would just start doing all the market research and gathering the stuff to see what's available for your clients. And then again, you kind of do a lease summary, comparables, and then you would do like a 1-page summary. This would be where, very similar to the CMA that you're used to doing, right? You're just basically pulling all that information and putting it in the marketing template. So what you're building here is a book for your clients so that you can have something to take to them and say, this is really what you are looking for anything that's out on the market. And then you would have the available properties, very similar to the closed leases. And what this is going to show you is the deal sizes, the different classifications of the asset, and then price per square foot as well. And then the comparative matrix that you would use. I have a better sheet for the comparative matrix that we're going to get to right now. And then the company disclaimer basically says you're not an appraiser and that you relied on market information to pull this data together for your clients. But here's what I'm presenting to you as good market statistics for whatever market you're looking at. Okay, so that is the actual package that I use when I'm doing evaluations. Can you all see this now? The Excel? Jen, you see that?
Yep,
okay.
You're good.
Okay, cool. So if y'all download this, that's fine. If you break it, I don't know how to fix it, so just download a new copy.
You guys can access through the tile on Home Sale Center under Commercial Corner, and then when you're using your home sale Google accounts, you will be able to go to File, Make a Copy, and save a copy of it to your Google Drive account, and then you can completely edit it, manipulate it, and use it. So
yeah, so this is exactly what I use whenever I take that data in that marketing package that I just showed you guys, and then take that data and put it into this analytical software. And what I'm trying to do here is trying to get what we call true cost of occupancy. Okay, so in this case, I don't know if y'all know where Rockville, Maryland is, but I was doing a lease out there once, and this kind of just to show you how this works. Usually in the first one, I think I have if I have 5 different locations, I'm going to have the ability to compare all 5 into one. But just so you know, this is kind of how this works. You would put the location address and then you put terms in years. So in this case, in the proposal 1, I have 5 years. But let's just say in this one, I have a 7-year deal. Okay. And in this first property, that rental rate is, let's say this is $30 a square foot, right? And it is 10,000 square feet. And they have 3% increases annually. So this thing that I built here, what this does is it takes year 1, year 2, year 3, because you're assuming that it's a 5-year lease, right? And it says, okay, based upon this data, you're gonna be paying 1.5 million over the course of 5 years in a lease value. Whereas this one, let's say this was 7, but that's not going to work. So we did a 5-year tab. Let's say this is 3 years, right? And you're going to be paying $50 a square foot because of a shorter term. So landlords are like, well, if you're giving me a shorter term, then I'm going to charge you more money. If you're giving me a longer term, I'll charge you less money. That's just how it goes, right? But it's also 8,000 square feet and not 10,000 square feet. And this landlord says, hey, I'm gonna escalate that, or let's just say I'm gonna leave this flat. In other words, the landlord said they're not gonna charge you but the flat for 3 years. There's gonna be no escalation, right? Okay. Well, if you're looking at both of these locations for your client, and you're looking at a 5-year term versus a 3-year term, you're looking at $30 per square foot versus $50 a square foot. Now, it depends on your market size. This actually may be a realistic thing if you're looking at, say, Baltimore versus Washington, D.C., or Philly versus Lancaster, right? So these actually may be a great example of some of the differences just in the markets, even in your own states. 10,000 square foot for rent, 8,000 square foot for rent. It's actually, as you can see here, based upon this information, it's cheaper to rent 10,000 square feet than it is to rent 8,000 square feet. Because 10,000 square feet is going to cost you 1.5, and then the 8,000 is going to cost you 2.1. So this spreadsheet gives you the ability to look at and compare multiple locations across the board. And then there's other things that we put in there, like free rent. Okay, well, let's say no free rent in that one and no free rent in this one. That's comparison. This guy over here, this landlord is giving us $20 in TI allowance, which means tenant improvement allowance. This guy is going to give us, let's say he's going to give us $30 in tenant improvement allowance. Well, now when you're looking at it, all right, so it's still cheaper to rent the 10,000 square foot, right? But let's say this guy over here, estimated CAM per square foot, and a CAM fee in commercial leases stands for common area maintenance. That is when you have to pay, I think we covered this last week or last month, but when you have to pay a fee to help maintain the shared spaces, common areas, if you will. So let's say these guys, this is that was obviously not right. Let's say they're charging $15 price per square foot, and these guys are charging $2 price per square foot. Estimated utilities, 2,000 even, because those are actual costs, right? Estimated taxes, because the tenants have to pay property taxes in some leases. So we keep 8,000 across the board there. And you can see what that does is that brings your annual building cost down to about 10,000 a piece in additional expenses, which means your monthly costs $24,000 for the 10,000 square foot building, and it is 53,000 for your 8,000 square foot building. So this is a great tool when you're looking at multiple locations and you're looking at a lot of data and you're trying to figure out what is the true cost of occupancy and what is the best deal for my client. Okay. What this will also do is you can also know what negotiation points to start working when you get to that level of the process. So you'll know, okay, I'm gonna need more tenant improvement allowance to make this deal more attractive. So, or I'm gonna need to pay, the landlord is gonna agree to pay the utilities, or whatever the case may be, to kind of get you there to a similar price per square foot basis. Does that make sense? So use this tool. It's a great resource. It is custom built. So there are apps and different service providers out there that you can pay to have this. It'll cost you about 180 bucks a month. Use the free resource and it'll at least get you in the conversation, right? So those are available to you, both the template and the marketing package. Let me go back to my slides here now. Okay. So you've done all that. Now you're ready to show some properties, right? Because that's the next step in getting your client to sign the lease. So you go out there, you show some properties, and guess what? Only 2 of them work out of those 5 that you narrowed down. And so now you have to go back to the drawing board, back to that analytical sheets and say, okay, based upon this information, I know that I'm going to need to get the contractor in here, and that contractor is going to cost me 50 grand. So how does that play into the affordability of the asset? And then you start negotiating it, and you start negotiating those points, price per square foot. You start negotiating your annual increases. You start talking about signage. You start talking about parking. You start talking about common area maintenance. What are your expense stops? All of the things that you would start to negotiate on from your tenant consultation. And then the process for this is, and I believe, I think I sent it to Jen. If not, we will have that available at some point. You start this process by drawing a letter of intent, okay? And so the letter of intent, it itemizes out just that. Here's what we intend on offering you to lease your building. Here's our term. Here's our rental rate. Here's what we want in tenant improvement allowance. Here's what we're trying to do, right? And then you would send that letter of intent to lease to the landlord or landlords. It is not a legally binding agreement. Some verbiage in there may appear to be legally binding, but it's not. So don't worry about getting any information wrong, because you can't really get into trouble with that. What that is that gives you a boilerplate to where the attorneys can start drawing and drafting a lease against that letter of intent. So the attorneys are going to have all of their legal language and things like that. And this is where I would say, if you are starting out doing commercial leasing, there's going to be a lot of stuff in those that you're probably not familiar with. And it may be beneficial to you to have an attorney review the lease, or have somebody maybe in your office that has more experience at doing some commercial leases. Probably a red flag in this is if the landlord doesn't have their own lease. If they say, send me the lease, that's probably not a good sign, because they haven't had the wherewithal to have an attorney draw a lease, and they're trying to put that expense under the tenants in most cases. So I'd be cautious of that. But after you get those leases, that generally can take anywhere from 2 weeks to a month. Then you would make red lines, is what they're going to call it, which are the attorneys will come in and they'll make different changes to different points, whether that be hours of operation, whether that be expense stops, you name it, anything in those clauses, what happens in a default scenario, things like that. You're going to see that, and they're going to redline it, and then the other attorney makes their changes and sends it back to them. So now you're at, 2 drafts of a lease, and then hopefully by the third, you kind of can come together and you can set that lease into motion. Just because you have negotiated and executed that lease, however, doesn't mean you get to occupy. Right? So if you're a good broker, then you will negotiate not paying rent until you occupy, or at least until a certain date. Because especially the way that things are now in the marketplace, whereas construction and government buildings being shut down still or just now reopening, the permitting process is taking forever, finding materials is taking forever. And so if you can't occupy, then, and you have agreed to start paying rent right from the get-go, you may be paying rent for 6 months and you can't even occupy the space, right? So that's what you don't want to have happen. When it says tenant build out and occupancy, that is generally speaking when you would want to start paying is upon occupancy. That's what I usually always try to go for. Some landlords, depends on the sophistication, will agree with that. Some won't. Some will say, well, they'll hem and haw back and forth, but that's really where your negotiation skills come into play. Now, also, let's talk about getting paid here as a broker for a minute, because that's important, because no one wants to work for free, right? So how the commissions work in commercial are a lot different than on the residential space, where it's like 1/2 of the first month's rent. I think, is that what you guys do? 1/2 of the first month's rent? How are y'all generally, if somebody can put there in the comments there, how are y'all generally doing the commission payment from the other broker? Like, is that a flat fee, or where is that? Because from what I've heard, it's 1/2 of the first month's rent plus a flat fee. Okay, cool. Thank you, Sandy. Yeah, that's very interesting. So we would probably never work under those conditions on the commercial side. What we would do is we would take, remember how I said the term of that lease that you're working on? So if it's a 3-year lease, you're going to take the total value of that lease. If it's a 10-year lease, you're going to take the total value of that lease, and then you're going to apply a certain percentage that you negotiate in the letter of intent or in your tenant representation agreement, which we're going to cover next month. you would negotiate your percentage or your fee based upon that volume of that lease. And then you would get paid. Usually it's kind of contingent upon each market. So in some markets, they say, we're going to get paid 1/2 upon signing and then 1/2 upon occupancy. Or maybe in a smaller deal, you're going to get paid 100% once it's signed. And then if there's sophisticated landlords, they're going to say, we're not going to pay you anything until usually the second month that you are in the building. So that's just generally how that commercial process works. So you can see from the time that you do a tenant consultation to the time that your client's business is up for running, you may be looking at 12, 16, 18 months before you actually get paid as a broker. Now that's not to scare you guys off. That's just the reality of what commercial leasing is. So from the agent's perspective, you're kind of building a future annuity, right? Because you know at some point you're gonna get paid for work that you're doing now, and you're gonna get paid in the future. So in some cases, that actually has helped out a lot of agents in down markets. So you'll see agents like myself that will do investment sales and commercial leasing. When the investment sales aren't hitting, we can still put food on the table because of commercial leases that we've done maybe 18 months ago. So it's a good idea to kind of do both of those and kind of do some commercial leasing while you're working on some sales activity as well. So I just want some realistic expectations on what you can expect there from the process. How are we doing on time, Jen? We're going, am I talking too much again?
You've got about 10 minutes left. So
Okay, cool. No worries. So some types of leases that you need to be aware of when you're doing commercial leases, and what are some of these terms in case if you have not heard them before and what they mean. A gross lease, which basically means that the landlord is going to charge you one fee and all the expenses are going to come out of the landlord side of the table. Okay. And then a net lease is going to be some aspect or an expense is going to be added on to the tenant side. So that may be utilities, or they may pay, let me see, they may pay like property taxes, or maybe property insurance or something like that. A gross lease and a full service lease, quite honestly, the only difference that I see that is that a gross lease is generally used in industrial properties, and then a full service lease is usually used in office properties. And it literally is the same thing. It just means that all the expenses are going to be covered by the landlord based off the rental rate that the tenant pays. Ground leases that's pretty common. Is what it is. You're an agreement that's going to allow you to lease the ground, not own it. You can pave it. You can do all kinds of stuff with it. Ground leases are a great way to start off in commercial. It kind of gets you in the know with like a lot less liability. And then we have a lease that is specific to retail, which I would not encourage anyone entering into. And be careful if the landlords try to put this clause in the lease. But that's a retail lease with a percentage clause. Okay, so let me explain this for those of you that aren't recently licensed, because I believe, at least in Maryland, there is a retail percentage lease question. And what it is you pay all of the expenses on the asset. So that's, you pay your rent, your insurance, your utilities, your maintenance, pay everything to the landlord, but then you also pay a percentage of your gross sales to the landlord. Okay. So y'all are probably sitting there thinking like, well, why would you do that? Well, you got to think in some markets, like if you're in Fifth Avenue in Manhattan, you're going to pay whatever you need to get in there. And the landlords know that. And so they're going to say, okay, well, you're going to pay for everything, and I want a percentage of your business. And then you would negotiate the threshold of what that is. You're probably not going to see that in your markets. I have seen the verbiage. I have never completed a retail percentage lease because I think that's a little nuts, if you ask me. But and then this is a big one. I think this is a good one. To kind of close on this topic, is your value proposition. Okay. So this is kind of really where home sale really wants to be able to come in and assist our agents with having the best tools and resources available to kind of give them a leg up on the competition. And so you're going to need to be able to sell your and our value proposition to your client. The good thing is that if y'all haven't done commercial leases before, then your client base probably doesn't have commercial relationships with brokers in the area, right? You are their first experience, so let's make it a good one for them, right? You have a very professional team available to you, whether that's through your office managers, your regional managers, through Jen and everybody, myself, everybody that can help you will help you, and we are part of your professional team, and that you can call on us to be able to assist you, or at least be able to point you in the right direction. We can guide you to attorneys that do commercial leases, that do the writing, that do the understanding some of the terms that you may not be familiar with. I would say always recommend, and I don't know if this is a legal thing, this is probably a Gary question, but be careful in referring an attorney because there may be a liability issue there. But I would just ask if they have an attorney that they have used in the past and anybody that they feel comfortable with. And if they say no, and can I send you some? That's kind of gonna really go a long ways in that conversation. The core thing is that you guys are the experts in your marketplace, and you're probably driving by these commercial strip centers or these commercial outlets or whatever asset type that they're specializing in. You probably already know about it by just being in the marketplace and knowing your local markets like the back of your hand. That is something that I can't necessarily assist because I'm not in everybody's market. I don't know everybody's market like the back of my hand, but you guys do. So that is part of your major value proposition is that, hey, look, I'm here, I'm your local boots on the ground. We have teams of people and resources available that can assist us in getting this to the table. And that's going to really take a lot of pressure and time off of them finding the right property. And it's really like you, Mr. and Miss Business Owner, focus on growing and building your business. Let me, your agent, assist in finding the best home for your business. And that's really how I would sell it, is you're selling a home for your business. It goes with the name, it goes with the brand. We're not selling something we're not. Let us find the home for your business, right? But yeah, you become part of their professional team, and you can help them understand some of the lease clauses that we went through. You can show them how you can negotiate the different points in the leases now by using some of those tools and resources available. we are working on building our tools and resources. I know that has been a reoccurring question for our commercial practitioners. So hold steady and just know that we are out there every day trying to build that toolbox for you. But yeah, so that's kind of what you're selling in the value proposition is. You have the local knowledge and resources, and you're backed by, you know, a regional and national group of professionals that can be there to assist you any way that they can, and, you know, allow them to continue to focus on their business. I could probably talk about, you know, all the different ways to analyze commercial leases and different points and things like that. It may be overkill and it's really dry subject, so I apologize. Try to make it fun and entertaining and educational at the same time. But that's kind of an overview on how you would do a commercial lease activity. So we want to open the floor now to any questions that you may have. So if you have a question, go ahead and type it in. And if you don't have a question, that's okay too.
If you think
I'm
of
sure
something later, you can always send it in.
Yeah, exactly. If you have a question, follow up afterwards, and yeah, we'll totally help you out any way we can.
Okay, well, I'll give you a couple more seconds to think of your questions if you have any. The recording is going to get downloaded. Everything will be home sale center, training, education tile, and then there's a tile for commercial corner so that you guys can easily use your new home sale Google account to get to the recording, get to the PowerPoint, all the resources that Scott has today. Just make sure you're in your home sale one. It won't let you access it if you're using your personal Google account. So just make sure you're toggling in the right Google account when you're getting into it, or let me know if you're having trouble, and I'm happy to help you guys with getting all the different resources that we have. But doesn't look like there's any questions. Our next commercial corner, just so you guys have the date and time to put it on your calendars, our next one is scheduled for Tuesday, March 8th at 1 o'clock. So if you want to just save Tuesday, March 8th at 1 o'clock, we will again send out a Zoom link, the topic, and some details for you. But if you guys also have questions or thoughts on a certain topic that you would love to see Scott talk about, please, as always, send that to me too. That way we're making sure we're hitting things that you guys are wanting to learn and needing to know while you're out there.
Awesome.
Okay. All right. Thank you guys. Thank you for tuning in today. Have a great rest of your day.
Okay. Bye-bye.